Geçelim. Şöyle. Today's watercolor landscape painting is called Lake Pine Trees. There's a couple of pine trees overlooking a nice still lake. But I'm going to add some mountains in the background to give us some interest. So this will be a fantasy landscape, but using big brushes and simple brush strokes. So join me and let's have some fun. Hey, this is Everett, Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. I'm broadcasting now from my studio in Chesapeake, Virginia, on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and LinkedIn. And I'm in my studio today with my wife, Gloria.
Hello and welcome.
And she'll be monitoring the broadcast and the chat room. The chat room's live, so you make some comments, give me a thumbs up. And if you're a new beginner or new viewer today, go ahead and sign in and subscribe to my channel. I'll be back here on a weekly basis every Thursday. So today I've got a landscape painting in watercolor, and it's gonna be live all the way. But I got a couple ideas how to put it together. I come up with an idea I wanted to do, a kind of a fantasy landscape, but I'm going to use large brushes and do simple brush strokes. And I think that's easy for everyone to understand and a good way to get a painting started and also to complete the landscape. But also want to make sure we have some fun. So join in with me. Right now I'm going over to my painting table and let's get started. Okay, bring this over. Okay, now on right here, everettswatercolors.com, that's my website. And on there, you can look at my art supplies. I have an art supply page. I have a classroom videos page, which has all the videos of all the past programs that I've live. And Fun with Watercolors is also a page on there where you can get a copy of my reference photograph and the drawing I'll be using today for my reference. And I have a QR code here. The QR code, you just put your camera on your cell phone on that, and you can click it on with your camera. That'll take you right to my website directly. And also on my website, in my Fun with Watercolors page, there's also a QR code which will take you to Everett's Watercolor Art Group on Facebook. Now there you can download your painting or your project of what you're doing today, if you're going to paint along, and then put it in there and post it so I can take a look at it and I can make some comments for you. I'd appreciate sharing your thoughts with me about that. So let's get started with our painting today. This is my reference photograph. This is I found a picture of a lake with some pine trees in it. Okay, that's kind of that's kind of giving me some reference ideas, some thoughts. I like the reflection in the water and so forth. It's a beautiful scene. Then I found another photograph of an island. And I'm going to put a mountain in the background. So I'm going to take this photograph here. I'm going to use this as far as a reference. And I'm going to add a mountain range in the background. So I'll use this. This is also a photo reference, just to get some ideas. So this is the drawing I came up with. This is my design drawing. And you can see here I got mountains in the background, sky, got some water here, which is the lake, and a little foreground. So that's what the basic drawing is going to look like. Okay, then as I get into the painting process. So this drawing here is on my Fun with Watercolors page on my website, and also these photographs here of the references. These two reference photographs. They're on my Fun with Watercolors page on my website. Okay, so I transferred the drawing now to my sheet of watercolor paper, and this is a quarter sheet which measures 15 inches long and 11 inches high. 140-pound Gemini watercolor paper. Okay, and that's the only watercolor paper I use in all my paintings, and it's available on my website on my supply page. And what I'm going to do today is going to have a little bit of fun. So I'm going to use large brushes. So I'll use the Hake brushes. I've got I'm going to have 3 brushes today. I've got a large Hake, I have a middle-sized Hake, and I have a small Hake. Okay, three different sizes of the Hake brush. I'm going to use all 3 of those today. And these are available on my website also. And then I'll be using some synthetic brushes from Holbein. There's a 1/2-inch flat. This is a number 16 round, a large round brush, and this is a number 8 round here. These are all synthetic brushes, and also the number 4 rigger brush. Okay, I'll be using those today in the painting. Okay, I'll be using more of a limited palette, but I'll describe the colors as I use them out of the palette as I get going here. So the first thing I'm going to do is okay, I haven't pinned this down. I'm going to just leave the paper sitting on my board. I usually don't. Sometimes I tape it down, but there's no reason to tape it down. Just so you're, what I can do is I can put a clip. I can put a clip on one corner, and what that'll do is that'll keep the paper from moving around on me. Okay, it just holds it down. All right, first thing I'm going to do with the large Hake brush, I'm going to dip it in my my water bucket, and now it's just loaded with water, and it's the Hake brush holds a lot of water, and it's a good way to. I'm going to wet the thing all the way down. That's load number 2. I'll take about 3 brush loads of water to wet the paper. This 140 pound is good paper to work with. It's archival. It's 100% cotton, so it takes a good paint load, and it does a good job. A little more water down here at the bottom. Now I'm looking at the sheen on the paper, make sure the paper is wet. So I'm going to do the first part here. I'm going to do a little wet on wet technique here just to get started. And so I wet the paper, nice and wet, back and forth, just like painting a house, back and forth. Okay, now we're done with the large Hake. I'm going to go to the middle-sized Hake, and I'm going to, before I do that, mix up some paints. Now I'm going to paint the sky. I'm going to start with the sky background. So I'm going to take a little bit of yellow ochre. I'll start with yellow ochre. It'll give me a nice warm background. Little background color. I'm going to add more color as I go, and I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue up here for the sky, and maybe I'll add in a little bit of Payne's gray, a little bit of alizarin crimson. So I'm going to have a little bit of mixture. Those are my main colors I'm going to use here to get the sky started, the background. Okay, put that brush aside for a second. Okay, now what I do here with my my Hake, my middle-sized Hake, is just wet the brush, wipe out the excess moisture, and I'm going to pick up the yellow ochre, load the brush. Now this is wet on wet. I've got the sky already wet up here, so I'm going to start putting the sky colors in. I'm going to leave a little bit of white paper showing. But I'm going to go right on down and paint the sky. And of course, the reflection into the water will have some of the same colors in here, so to keep on going. Okay, now that's still wet, and I'm gonna pick up some ultramarine blue. I haven't really washed the brush out. I just picked up the second paint, and get a load full of ultramarine blue. This will be for some of the sky color. I go across the top, and I'm going to go in. This is going to be the sky color, and also building in some cloud formations. So go ahead and put that in. And I'm going to bring this on down here, a little reflections across the waterway here, the lake, a little color there in the water. Okay, now watch. Rinse out the brush a little bit. Now I'm going to pick up a little bit of. I'm going to go back to ultramarine blue. Pick up a little bit of Payne's gray. I want to darken it up a little bit, and a little bit of Alizarin crimson. Alizarin crimson with a little bit of Payne's gray mixed in with that ultramarine blue. So I got a little darker mixture now. Now I'm going to go in now. I'm going to put in some cloud formations. Just a little bit of clouds up here in the sky. A little bit of blue coming through. And a little bit down here in the water, the reflections and so forth. So I'm kind of filling in the blanks here, and then the foreground is going to be a little bit darker. So I'll put some down here. So I'm just kind of preparing the painting here for the rest of the colors. Yeah. Okay, now that's really the first coat. So let me, I think what I'll do is add a little bit more, just a little bit more blue, a little more Payne's gray, a little more Alizarin crimson. Yeah, one more layer of darker paint here, just another layer. So I'm going to put a little more darker color here, just to darken up that sky a little bit. We get a little more clouds up there. Up here in the foreground. Okay, all right. Okay, now I'm going to blow dry. I'm going to turn on my hair dryer. So we're going to dry it. Okay, so the first step was to wet the paper. And then I'll do a wet on wet technique, and I put in the background colors here. We've got the sky and the water and the foreground, all with the same colors. And that was a mixture of ultramarine blue. After I put the yellow ochre on there as a background, then I put in ultramarine blue mixed in with a little bit of Payne's gray and alizarin crimson. Give me a darker cloud color for the sky. So we'll blow dry it here to get nice and dry so I can put the next layer on. Normally, I like to let my paintings dry naturally. When I get this point here, I just set it aside, take a small break, and then come back in about 10 minutes, and the paper will be dry mostly. But for the demonstration today, I'll use the blow dryer. It's a little bit quicker for demonstration purposes. I'll make sure the sky is nice and dry, and you can see when the paint dries, the color gets a lot lighter. It looked dark when I put it down there and it was wet. It always looks a lot wetter when it's wet. It looks a lot darker when it's wet. Excuse me. But when it dries out, it looks a lot lighter. So it dries about 40%. So you need to take that into account when you're doing a watercolor painting, that it's going to dry lighter once it dries, once the paint dries. When I test it with the back of my hand, still feels a little cool up there. When you touch the back of your hand, if it feels cool, it's still damp. It's still a little bit moist. It should feel warm when you touch it with the back of your hand. We'll go up here. Okay, that feels pretty good. Now we're getting there. Okay. Remember, I wet the sky with water, and then I put wet paint on top of that. So the paper was soaking wet at the point when I finished there. Okay, all right. I get a nice dry. Okay, so I'm going to mix up now. I'm going to mix up the background. I'm going to put in the background mountains. So I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm using the Hake brush, the medium-sized Hake. I'll use the medium-sized Hake. So I'm using big brushes today because really, to start a painting, any kind of a landscape or any kind of painting like this, with this large enough, with a quarter sheet size, use the largest brushes that you have. And the Hake brush here is a nice size. This measures about an inch and a half. The large Hake is about 2 inches, 2.5 inches. So it covers a lot of territory with one brush stroke. Let's see here. What I'll do is let me test. I'm gonna test my color out here just a little bit, make sure that that's good. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna get painting the mountains in the background. So these mountains now are back here, and they're in the background. So they're gonna be blue, which is a cool color. There's also a blue recedes into the background of the landscape. So using blue for the mountains here is a good idea for background mountains. It reminds me of the Blue Ridge Mountains, where the background mountains look blue because of the distance and also the atmosphere around and the lighting and so forth. Okay, and I can use the edge of the brush I can fine tune a little bit, but that's about the size I want, the shape and so forth. Okay, now we're gonna well, let this drying a little bit. I'm gonna mix up the next color. The next color is gonna be the little middle ground or forward mountain range. It's gonna be a little warmer, so I'm gonna add a little bit of burnt sienna, mixed in with that blue ultramarine to warm that up a little bit. I still want ultramarine in it, but I'm going to warm it up with a little bit of burnt sienna, and maybe a touch of Payne's gray, because it'll be a little bit darker, but darker and warmer than those background mountains. Okay, and also what I can do here is I can take the credit card now, and I can go in here and maybe put in a little bit of texture. So I'm scraping out a little bit of maybe the highlights on the top of the mountain here. A little bit of highlights. Give it a little texture. So I'll use the credit card. This mountain over here, what I can do here, what I'll do is I can take a tissue and I'll just lay it on top and just kind of lightly touch, and that'll pull up the excess water. I just want to take a little bit of excess moisture off, okay? And it makes it a little bit lighter. I want those to be far, far away, further back in the background. Okay, so now this closer mountain range is a little bit warmer. It's a mixture of the ultramarine with a little bit of burnt sienna. So it has a warmer color. It's still dark. It's a dark color, but it's not black. It's a darker color, but it's also a warmer color. So this will be the lower or the middle ground area. It's sort of the middle ground. It's forward of those other mountains to show that there's background mountains and way in the background, and coming a little bit forward, we have these warmer mountains a little closer to the foreground. Okay. All right. And let me pick up some more here. Now we got another part of the mountain range over here on the right side of the landscape. So this is kind of like a fancy painting. I wanted to do a landscape with watercolor, and I wanted to use a big brush work with the Hake brushes, but I also wanted to do mountains. I like to do mountains. Mountains are very interesting. Well, they'll bring us down here and make sure I got a level bottom there. I'll use the smaller brush now. I want to do there's one little part here that I'll take the smaller flat brush and fill in this little area here. There's a little tip of the mountain here that's off in the water that I want. It's a little bit smaller spot, so I'll use a size brush to do the job. All right. Now we'll let that one dry a little bit, and I can start mixing up the let's see. The next thing I want to do is work on I can do the foreground. Now the foreground is going to be a little bit dark. So what I'll do is I'll mix up a little bit of Payne's gray. I'll put some alizarin crimson. I'll put a little bit of burnt sienna. Even a little bit of quinacridone violet. And also I can add a little bit of it because it's in the foreground. It's also be closer. I can put a little bit of Hooker's green, just a little bit of green in the mix. So it's going to be just a mixture. Okay, so the Hake brush, Hake, it's pronounced Hake, which is Japanese. It's a Japanese brush, and it was designed way back in the 12 over 2,000 years ago. So I'm going to put that foreground. Here's going to be I'm going to put a rock up here in the foreground. Put a little bit of more burnt sienna over here. So I'll put a little rock up here in the foreground. And then this is just going to be this will be rocks and also some shrubbery and just stuff in the foreground here. It's not as critical as far as what it is. It's just going to be part of the foreground. It'll be rocks and some bushes and twigs and stones and so forth. So I can shape it up a little bit. Rough edges, a rough edge. Okay, now I can see this loses the shiner, so I can go up here now and play a little bit with the texture of this one. On this one here, I can pull this one down. Let's see if I can get a little scraping gun on this one. Get a little line going. I can kind of build in some texture in these mountains here instead of just having them plain. Um, so I'm just scraping the paint right off the edge. Okay, and then down here at the bottom, I can start putting in some scraping in some rocks down here also. Using the corner of the card, I can scrape out this texture. By scraping on the edge, you don't want to use the corner because the corner would dig into the paper. So you want to use the scraping motion, which you use the edge of the card, and that gives you the scraping of the paint off of the paper, and it gives you that textured look of rocks and so forth. Okay. Then I can come in here with a brush load of darker paint, and I can go in here and put a little bit of some more texture, kind of fill in some of those spots. So you don't have to be very careful with the scraping because you can always go back in and fill in some of the spaces with more brush work.
We had a comment, neat technique.
Yeah. That's a lot of fun. Credit card technique is not it's nothing very detailed about it. It's an old credit card. I cut it in half and just use it for texture. See, one thing I wanted to do here, I wanted to hold off on that. I'll hold off on that. Okay, let me go ahead and dry this. This is wet, so let me dry it. Okay, so I put in the middle ground area of mountain. Look forward mountain range here, sort of in the middle ground there, coming forward. And then I added in a foreground here with rocks, and there'll be some rocks and some weeds and twigs and so forth. Now, the next thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and work on the water just a little bit, get a little definition of the water. We'll kind of work down the painting here one step at a time. But I want to get the big areas in first, the mountains in the foreground. Got the sky, then the mountains in the foreground. This doesn't have to be perfectly dry. I just want to get it dry enough so it won't run around. There we go. Okay. Okay, now for the water, very simply, I'm going to put a little bit of reflection here off these rocks over here, these mountains. I'll take a little bit of Payne's gray and a little bit of this, little bit of ultramarine and Payne's gray, and I'm going to come down here. I don't want it too dark. So I'm going to come off this mountain range here and come down and build a little shadow pattern. Reflection from the mountain. And what I'll do here, just like I did with the blue mountain back there, it's still wet, so I'll take a tissue, I'll put it down here, and just lightly press and pick that up. So I don't want it to be as dark as that, so I lighten it up. Just while it was still wet, I could pick it up. Again, over here I'll do the same thing. I'll take the Hake brush, the Hake brush, and go in here and put in the reflection on this side. Okay, then I'll do the same thing. I'll take a fresh tissue. Okay, and just lay this down, kind of press, just tap it a little bit. That picks up the excess moisture and gives me a nice reflection from the mountains into the water. Okay, and then I think the last thing I'll do here is let me rinse out. Let me wash out the brush a little bit. When I wash out the brush, I put it back in the bucket, the rinse bucket, and then when I clean out the brush, what I do is I come in, I take a towel, and I squeeze out the excess moisture. Okay, and so there's not too much water in there, and then I can pick up what I want here on the brush. So I really want a dry brush, so it's very little moisture in there. And what I'm going to do with that dry brush, I'm just going to go across a little bit across the water. I want some streaks, okay, to make it look like water. Basically a dry brush. It's just a brush that I took all the water out of it. Now I'm picking up a little bit of paint off the palette. Make sure it's dry. Then I'm going to come across here and get some streaks. I want to build some streaks across the water and make it look like reflections coming off of the water. Make it look like it's moving a little bit. Okay, just a little bit. Don't want to overdo it.
That's a very light touch.
It's a light touch, very basically just going across the very gently across the paper. Not putting a lot of pressure at all. Okay. All right. Now the next thing. Remember this. I named this painting the Lake Pine Trees. Well, where are the pine trees? All right. Well, let me talk about that. What I use here. Here's a technique I use here a lot. But before I do that, let me make sure it's dry. I just put some paint on there, so let me dry that step off. Make sure it's dry. So what I did there, I just put a dry brush. Used a Hake with all the water taken out of it and just a little bit of paint. And just did a light brush across there to give it streaks, to give it the impression of water, reflection of water. A little bit of movement. Just a little bit of movement. I'm making sure that it's dry. Okay. All right. So what I'm using a tool here that I use a lot. This is called wet media acetate. It's called Duralar. It's a piece of wet media acetate, and I use it in watercolor. I have this available on my website. I sell it by the sheets. I recommend getting 3 or 4 sheets of this because this covers one quarter sheet. But if you use a bigger sheet of watercolor paper, you might need more. So you might need 2 or 3 of these, and a backup. Get a couple of them. So I recommend several sheets of Duralar. What I use this for, Duralar is here. I can go on here now with, let's say I'm going to use the large brush. This is this number 16 round Holbein brush. I'm going to use taking burnt sienna right out of the well. Load up the brush. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to design where I want to put that tree. So on top of this Duralar, I can plan out where I'm going to put that tree before I do it, before I do the painting. So I'm going to put a pine tree right there. That's one of them. Now the other, I got more pine trees I want to put in. I put this little more paint. You have to use thicker paint. If it's too watery, it won't stick on the acetate. I'm going to put another one over here, about the same height. Okay, and then I'm going to do a third one, and that one's going to be here. I'm going to change. I'm going to angle this one in just a little bit. Give us a little different angle on that one right there. Okay. All right. So there, I've located. I'm going to bring these down, just right here in front of the foreground area, and it'll be covered up with grass and so forth. So okay. So when I take now, I move it. I can move this around if I wanted to change location. Move this over here. So looking at the background where I want the trees to wind up, I can kind of play with this design a little bit before I do the actual painting. So this wet media acetate is very useful for designing and also to add an element in your landscape. While I'm here, I'm also planning on putting a couple figures in here and maybe a little boat. So I can do that right now. I can go in here and say, okay, I'm going to put some figures right here. Kind of get an idea, and then I might put a boat here in the water or next to the water. So I can look at, and what I'm doing here is I'm practicing the scale. How big should a boat be compared to the size of the people, et cetera, et cetera. So I can locate things in my painting before I actually do the painting. So I do a little practicing here before then I can set this aside over here, and then I can go ahead and use that. So I'm going to go ahead and paint that in. So I'm going to, let me mix my colors now. I'm going to use for the trees, I'm going to use burnt sienna. I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine blue to that. I want a little bit dark. I want to. These are pine trees. I mean, they got a dark brown color. I don't really care about the actual perfect color mix, but I want a darker color. So I add a little bit of ultramarine to that burnt sienna. Get a nice dark, rich color. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead now. I'm going ahead and I pretty well located. I know my trees where I want to go with that. Just above that, it's going to be right in there, just above that mountain. All right, just on the side of that peak. So now I go in there now. Now I go in and I put in my brush stroke. Okay. Then I want to bring that back down here this way. I'm using the number 16 round Holbein round brush, which is a nice brush. It's got comes to a nice sharp point, and it holds lots of paint. So it's a good picture. It's a good one to do this kind of tree trunks with and so forth. And so I really recommend this brush. It's a synthetic brush that really does good. And the paints I'm using today is Holbein. This is Holbein Artist Watercolor paints. And there are 108 colors, and I have them all on my website. They're all available on my website, open stock. You buy them by the tube. Okay. Now what I can do there also.
Myrna had a comment you might.
Oh. No, I don't want to draw. I don't want to make any pencil marks on the paper. The question was, should I draw the tree in first place? You can, if you want to be sure. Now what I'm doing now is I'm picking up a little bit of the paint now before I'll answer that question some more. I'm kind of vary the value just a little bit. I didn't want it to be a solid color of the same color. So I take the tissue and I'm going to modify that just a little bit, pick up a little bit and give a little bit of texture to that tree. Okay. And then I can even scrape some off. I can take my, get my credit card and I can come down here and I can scrape in a little texture also, little lines and so forth. Okay, now I got another one to do. No, I don't want to draw. I don't want to draw into the sky. I don't want to put any more marks on here. I know pretty well where it is. I use my reference. I line up my drawing where I want it to go, and I line up with where I want it to go as far as those mountain tops are, and where it is down here at the bottom. That's kind of where I lined it up. So this next one is going to be about right. This one right here is going to be right here. I know right where to go. So and I'm going. I didn't put this on the drawing because this is something I wanted to demonstrate in the painting here. I wanted to demonstrate how it could be done. So here I'm going to put in the second tree. So this one here is going to go in here, and it's got a pretty straight trunk, so I'm going to go straight up. I'm not going to get too fancy with this one.
That was good input, though.
Outstanding question. Yes. And most people would draw that in, and it's fine. You can draw it in, but be very careful with your pencil marks. You don't want to have too many pencil marks on top of your painting. There's nothing wrong with that. Pencil marks are okay. Sometimes they're added attraction. Where people like to know what the artist is thinking about. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to dab off a little bit of the color so that it's not all the same. And when you dab off, make sure you move the tissue around. Don't dab in the same spot, or else you'll wind up putting paint on the where you don't want it to go. Okay. And I can scrape this one also. I can scrape this one down. Give a little texture on that one. Give a little mark. Okay. Now I got one more pine tree, and that one there I'll line it up for you. That one there, I got those two in, pretty close to where I wanted it. And this one's going to be off to the left and just over top of that left forward mountain there. Okay, so I got that lined up, and it's going to lean in a little bit. So I made this one these are pretty straight, but this one's going to lean just a little bit. So load up the brush, load up with fresh paint. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to lean this one in just a little bit in toward the center of the painting. There we go. Just give it a little angle. And then I'll come in and add a little more to that. I want the trunks to be a little bit wider at the bottom. That's what most tree trunks are. And bring this right on down to this rock, behind this rock area, which will cover it up. Okay. And I could have leaned out a little bit more. I could have changed it, but I think that's enough. Okay. All right. And I can do the same thing here. Take the tissue, get a clean section, and I'm gonna dab this just a little bit. I'm gonna there. I think you can see there. If I showed you a close up, you can see I've changed the color just a little bit, just by dabbing and modifying the color a little bit. Then I'll use the scraping just to give a little texture, maybe some lines on the bark. Give a little character. There. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to add a few limbs. So I'm going to use my rigger. I'm going to add a few limbs here to the tree. So here is really kind of you know, if you have a photograph you're trying to follow, I'm not going to use a photograph to follow. I'm going to use my artistic license, and what that means is I can do whatever I feel appropriate. That's what artistic license is. It's you have the freedom to express and do the design as you see fit. But what I want to do though, when I put the limbs in there, I'm going to try to avoid covering any of the important areas. For example, here I'll put a limb out here to the side over here. I'll come about this far up, and then I'm gonna go over here a little bit, put a limb on this side. Kind of take it on out, and then I can come up here a little bit more. Now this limb, I want to bring across, probably across this section and across this mountain, and right up into this area here. Okay, and then I'll put a few more, just to show. I'll stay inside the mountain. Yeah, I'll stay in front of the mountain. Come up here a bit. As you go up, the limbs get a little. The angles get a little bit steeper as you go toward the top of the tree. So you kind of use that philosophy there. When they're down here at the bottom, they kind of get flatter. They lay out, and you can add branches to it if you want to add a branch. You know, and we can add twigs to it and branches and so forth. Okay, and over here I want to come across. I think this one I want to stay. I want to stay away from this late part here. I want to keep that a little bit by itself, but I may want to come across there anyway. So what I think I'll do, don't want to repeat this one over here. I want to be a little bit different. So I think what I'll do is I'll go a bit higher, come up like that, and this one over here I can cross over in front of the other tree, and then okay, I'll work on this third one over here. Okay. Now this is not important. I'm just don't cover up some important parts of your landscape that you're trying to keep unique or something, which is the sky or maybe the background mountains. You don't want to cover those up too much. So you just want to kind of be aware of those things as you're putting these things into your landscape. This white area is kind of important because that's the whitest spot on the paper. So a few branches there will make it look interesting. Okay. And this poor little tree here's only got two little branches, so I'll put a third one on. So I'll come over here and put one right in here. Okay. All right. Okay, I need to dry that because it's still wet. Let's dry the tree off. So there, I've demonstrated the use of what I call the wet media acetate, which is Duralar, which is the brand name. And the wet media acetate is a way of designing something on your painting before you actually paint it. So by putting the trees on that acetate, I was able to plan out the location before I painted them on the actual painting. And that's a good thing to have for this type of painting here, where you want to locate something that you want to take your detail about it, and you want to have a good design. So 3 trees is enough here. I got 1 here and 2 over here. That's a nice breakup. And there'll be some smaller trees in the background, but they're not going to be that important. So right now I've laid out the basics. I've done the basic structure of the painting. I've got the pine trees, the lake, and the mountains. So now I'm gonna go and put in some detail, just a little bit of detail. Make sure this is nice and dry. Okay, all right. So detail-wise, the trees, I'm going to put some foliage on it. Well, here's where the third hake comes in. Remember, I used the large hake for wetting down the paper to cover the paper with water. Then I used the middle-sized hake for the background mountains and the foreground. And I could have used the hake for the tree trunks, but I decided to use the large round brush because it does such a great job with the point and everything. Here I'm going to mix up, yeah. I'm going to cover this up now with some leaves, and then I can always add more detail to the limbs and the trunk and so forth. And I want to find out where my empty spots are before I go any further. So when the sun's back here behind the mountain, so this trees are backlit. So really, I don't have to worry about color up here. It's all going to be backlit. So it's just going to be a dark color of foliage. So let me get some darker bright. Add a little bit of Lutheran crimson in there, a little bit of quinacridone, a little bit of Payne's gray. Okay, all right, now more burnt sienna. Okay, alizarin crimson. That's what I get. What I get really used a lot of that anymore because it's a beautiful color and it adds a lot of color. What I'm doing is I'm taking the water out of the brush. I'm cleaning the brush out and I'm using a towel and I'm squeezing the brush, taking all the extra water out. Now I want a dry brush. So what I'm going to do is this dry brush, and I'm going to take a tissue here, and I'm going to mess the brush up. I'm going to mess it up. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing against it. I'm making the bristles stand out. And this is something that the Hake brush, Hake brush is really good at. So here it is. It looks like see the edge is real flat. Now I go into the paint now with this brush. Now I can go in and do a nice texture. Texture of leaves. Okay, and I got to get a little bit more paint on my brush. Now here also, I don't want to cover up some important areas. I need to cover up here the top area because that's where the branches are and so forth. But I want to make sure I don't cover up the important things. I want to tell the story here: the lake, and of course the mountains, and the nice, beautiful sky out there with the light coming through. So a lot of the top part here now can be these two trees here. I put a lot of ultramarine blue there. So take a little more burnt sienna. That brush nice and dry. Make it a little darker at the top. Blend that color in just a little bit with the other one. Maybe lift it out a little bit with a tissue. So building a little texture here with this Hake brush to show the branch, to show where the leaves are on the branches. But I want to keep some of that mountain showing through because that's the interesting part of the landscape is to look at the background. Okay. All right, that's enough on the trees. And you can go on, you can add on as much as you want. I could add more color or I could just add more texture. Down here now I'm gonna add some texture now here to the bottom. I'm gonna put some bushes down around this trees down here. So use the same brush stroke. I'm just filling the dry brush and I'm just tapping it, stippling it like a stipple motion, just tapping on the paper. A little darker value there around the base of the trees. Foreground a little bit darker color here in the foreground. Break it up a little bit. Okay, and also here down, I want to scratch out some grass. I got now I have a wet Once I get a wet area, then I can use my credit card here, and I can scrape out more texture. And here I can scrape out some fall weeds around these trees near the rocks and so forth. Again, that'll give us some more interest and so forth. Okay. All right. Now, last thing I want to do is I'm going to add in this little boat with a couple people here in the foreground. So I really thought about this. I said, well, I didn't want to do a drawing with it, but I want to leave that up to the artist to put in what they want. You can put in where I decide I want to put in a boat and a couple figures. So I'm using red. I'm using I'm using Pyro Red, beautiful red color. It's my medium red. The Alizarin Crimson is very dark. It's a very rich, dark red. Uh, that's a beautiful color, but I wanted this to be a little bit brighter. Number one, it's in the foreground. It's also, I want to capture the eye. This will capture the attention of the viewer. You can't miss this red boat. Number one, that's why I picked the color. And of course, the locations here in the foreground. So it's the first thing you see when you look at the painting. The only other thing I would think about is a little bit of practice on drawing the shape of a boat. This is a little, maybe a rowboat or some kind of, I don't even want to design what kind of boat it is. Now on the figures, what I want to do is I'm going to use some color here. I'm going to put an orange jersey or an orange shirt on one of them, on one figure. So this is orange jersey over here. And on the other figure, I got two figures. The other figure I'm gonna put a blue. Let's say I'm gonna use a cobalt blue. First one I used yellow orange for the first one. Yellow, it's called yellow orange. That's a Holbein color. And this is cobalt blue, another Holbein color. And can you imagine? I have 108 colors that I can use in my palette. 108 colors that I can use. And I haven't begun to use them all. I've used a lot of them, but it's you know. Okay, now I'm gonna put some. I'm gonna make a khaki color. Here would be maybe a little bit of yellow ochre mixed in with a little bit of burnt sienna. May make a khaki color here. I think I'll put the khaki. I think I'll put the khaki over on the blue with the blue. And then on the orange jersey guy, I'm gonna put a pair of black trousers. So I put him over with black. Okay. Now the last thing you do is once you get the body and the clothing on, then you put in the head. It's just a little dot. You want to go easy on that. You don't want to go overboard on that. Now, what I thought I'd do here now is also add in a little, maybe a little dimension of what they're doing. So I'm going to put over here, I'm going to put in a long pole. Now that could be a fishing pole, or it could be a pole to move the boat with. One over here, this side. Okay. And I think I need to attach a little bit of that blue. Almost done. I've got one more little mark here to do. Let's see. I'll put this little contact here. He's touching that. And I got to put the inside of the boat. So I'll make the inside of the boat dark. So I'm using a little bit of the Payne's gray, and that'll define the inside of the boat in shadow. We'll Come down here. So this is detail work. I'm using this number 8 round with a sharp point. And to do the artwork here. So you need a good round brush that comes to a nice sharp point. Okay. All right. Last little touch I have, I'm going to put some shadows on those gentlemen. So I'm going to mix a little bit of ultramarine in with that burnt sienna, make me a little gray color. And but before I do that, I want to beef up the beach a little bit. The beach color, a sandy beach. Got a wiper shop. Clean out my section over here. I'll make a little beach color. Burnt sienna, yellow ochre, with just a touch of burnt sienna. Okay. And what I'm going to do is take this half-inch flat, and I'm going to go in here and put a little bit of. I'm going to try. What I'm going to do is put it down in there, lay it flat, and do like a flat stroke here, and put in a little more definition here on the beach. Make it look like a little sandy color, a little sandy spit here. If you look at that, if you look at the picture I had as my reference, it had a nice beach there. It had a nice sandy beach with the beautiful colors of the water. I didn't want to go that route. I didn't want to put in the extra colors and so forth. It wasn't necessary. So I wanted to keep it simpler. I just wanted to get the feeling of here I am out on a lake and possibly on a fishing tour. Okay, let me dry that real quickly. Let's see. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow. I'll use that small brush. A little bit of ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, just a little bit of gray. And I need a shadow here for the boat. See the light's coming this way from right toward left. So the shadow will be on this side. I'll put a little bit of shadow on the boat here. It makes it more believable that it's sitting on the ground. And that would follow the shape of the boat itself. Okay, and then for the figures, just a little shadow out here. Like that. Maybe I'll make that shadow just a little touch darker. Okay. The only thing that I would add would be maybe some over here on this landscape here is maybe put some indications of possibly foliage over here, maybe some trees along the edge of the water. Just a little rough, a little darker color here at the bottom. And that water reflection at the bottom is important. Show the edge of the water line. And then a little bit over here. Again, just rough texture. Maybe a little tree line along the edge here, little bushes. And to accentuate that highlight of the water line there, the lighter area, that's the water line. And there's some trees up here, little bushes along the edge of the landmass. Maybe kind of define that a little bit better. And the last thing I want to do, I'll keep saying one more thing. I'm going to take some white paint. I do have white paint on my palette, and I use it sparingly, but I use it quite often. I'm going to put some sailing boats over here in the water, way over here. And they'll show up because they're the only white things in the water. So there's a sail there. And I'll put another one here, another one, a little partner, a little buddy. Okay. And then with a little bit of black paint, just a black paint, and I'll put the bottom of the boat, just the body of the boat underneath that white. Just a hint of the boat. That's all it needs. Okay. All right, let me give a quick blow dry. And I'm going to put a mat around it. Try that again. It didn't work the way I wanted it to. So I'll put the body in first, the boat, and then I'm going to put the white sail on top. Wiped it out with a piece of. If you're not happy with something, just grab a tissue and take it right out before it dries. I'm going to put another shot at it. Put the sail on this one. A little triangle on that, and another one over here. Just a hint, a little suggestion that there's a little sailboat out there in the water. Okay. All right, let's get the mat. Take off the clip. Put the mat around the board. All right. Bring it over to the side just a little bit so we can see it. Get some extra brushes here in the way. Okay, there's the painting of lake pine trees with the two figures out there going fishing and a couple sailboats in the water. So let's go back to my main camera. Well, I really had some fun today. I said, number one, we would do a fantasy landscape. I took a couple of photographs and I made up a landscape. And then I said, use the big brush and big strokes, basically, just to do some basic shapes. And then I said, well, we're going to have some fun. So I hope I accomplished all those things. That was my goal for today. And before I go, I showed another one, and Gloria just reminded me. Let me take you back to my painting table. Sometimes I forget this, and Gloria always helps me out on this. I did an earlier one, which was pretty close to the one I did today. The colors were just a little different. I made the trees a little darker, and I think there's more glow here. I shadowed down the sides. Now, if you believe it or not, I started this one. I made palm trees over here. Well, I washed those out with paint and put, they were palm trees, and I changed them into pine trees. So that's how I started with this whole painting idea. And I put some buildings back here in the background. There's a little area over here. You know what? Anybody have an idea what that could be? That little section right here. Well, I thought about it. I said, well, I'm gonna leave it there long and we'll talk about it. I can make that into a little tent where they're camping out in the tent and then going off and doing the fishing. So that could become a tent size. But I'm not going to do it. I'm finished with that. So that's my 2 paintings I did. I did one earlier, and I showed the one I did today. So I wanted to share that with you, and thanks to Gloria reminding me of that. That's something I wanted to show anyway. So I'll be back here again next week on Thursday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and just like every other week. And I'll see you then.
Bye.
So